Welcome to our first show of Business of Sports, Playmakers Beyond the Competition. I am Ken Dubinsky with Chris Roseman, and we are excited to talk about sports, but kind of a different way, looking at the business of sports and the people that make it happen outside of the field of play. So, Chris, it is really exciting for me to work with you, somebody who's been around sports in St. Louis for 24, 25 years, and anybody who has seen a big event in St. Louis sports over the last quarter century, chances are Chris has been behind it. So, Chris, former vice president of the St. Louis Sports Commission, 24 years there. Welcome. It's a thrill to do the show with you.
Ken, I never thought we'd be here. It was about 2 years ago that we met, and I was with the Sports Commission at the time, and we were working on the Mizzou-Memphis game. And you had the chips, and we were working on our hospitality out front. And meanwhile, selling tickets and doing all kinds of fun stuff on the inside. But on the outside, we had Luther Burden's chips out there. So that was the first time we got to meet. It's been a fun ride. I've been doing this since about the early 90s. And first as a volunteer, and then I got hired on as an intern. And just the track that's, the path to get to where we are these days, and the experience that we kind of, put together as far as, doing Big 12 football championships or Final Fours or Olympic trials or whatever it might be. It's been a fun run. And the best part about the business, yes, there's been some great moments that I've been a part of as far as what happened on the court, on the field, or in the pool, or whatever it might be. But man, I tell you, the people behind the scenes that make these events happen is a great story. There's just some fascinating people that I'm really looking forward to showcase on this show, and bring these people to the forefront for just a little bit. I know the ticket sellers, the reason we buy the tickets is because of what happens on the competition field. But I just really looking forward to telling their stories and sharing their stories. So with that, I'll kind of let Ken, to introduce yourself as far as, what your background is in the NIL and all that kind of fun space.
Yeah, I've had kind of a career that's kind of been sandwiched between sports. The first 10 years I was in sports television, producing games and shows, and then got into a business career for 25 or so years, and then kind of happened into the NIL space about 3 years ago when a good friend Demetrius Johnson was representing Luther Burden, and together we created the Luther Burden potato chips.
Yeah, they are.
And I've been really lucky to partner with a number of key players: Marvin Harrison Jr., Nick Bolton, Kansas City, and now another visual aid, Wilson Contreras of the Cardinals. Have one out now, so you can get that at Schnucks and top convenience stores. Shameless plug. But the NIL space has been really interesting to me, and that's why today's guest, Brad Larrondo, who we'll get to shortly, is just an absolute expert on it, and should be really good conversation for everybody to hear. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do and kind of where the show came about. Chris, you've been around it so long. We're going to have a number of team executives, agents. Excited about what we're going to bring to the listeners.
Yeah, like I kind of touched on before, it goes these, like where I come from, I did a lot of one-off events, meaning the events are championship type of events where you build and build up, and the bid process would start 3 or 4 years out, and you put on a great bid to host an event, and you had to bring all those components. It's really a small business that kind of comes together, that kind of lives and breathes for a certain amount of time. In my case, whether it was a Final Four, whether it was getting the funding in place, or getting the deal in place, or getting the venue locked down, or there were so many people that you had to bring together to make that happen. At the Sports Commission, it was a smaller staff, but that was kind of the tip of the spear. There were so many people that came together to produce those events, and like I said, the people that are behind the scenes that really care to make St. Louis a better place to live, work, and play through sports. Like we used to say at the Sports Commission, sports has such an impact on our community here in St. Louis, and just really looking forward to sharing those stories and introducing some of those people that you might not know. Some you'll hear on the radio, but some you won't, or you might see on TV. But there's so many great personalities that are behind the shows, whether the CRO or the CFO or the sponsorship person, or the person putting together the licensing rights. It's just there's just so much to it, and so just looking forward to sharing those stories.
We are really excited to have as our first guest. We're really starting at the top, as they say. Brad Larrondo, CEO and General Manager of Every True Tiger, Mizzou's NIL agency. I tell you, Brad, I'll let him talk more about it, but 30 years in and around college athletics from every single angle. And quite frankly, it's such a unique combination that I think really has brought you to where you are today and where you're in a perfect position to really be where Tiger fans need you to be. So a lot of experience. I'll let you talk about it. Marketing, coaching, TV experience. So Brad, welcome and to be our first guest on the Business of Sports, Playmakers Beyond the Competition show. And welcome. We're thrilled to have you.
Well, appreciate that, Ken. And obviously you and Chris have been around this thing a long time and understand all the dynamics and changes that are happening. And I'm excited you guys get this show kicked off and really what it's going to be all about, here and appreciate you having me on. And, as you said, I've got a pretty varied background. I have spent about 32 years now in college athletics at across various levels of competition and in various, positions. And, I've been at Boise State, at Auburn, and now here at Mizzou the last 3 years. And inside of the athletic department for the majority of that time, a lot of it either inside of a football program or leading external operations in the areas of fundraising, sponsorships, marketing and promotions, media relations, all those kind of things. And I think the reality of the ecosystem that college athletics is in right now, it has become such a much more professionalized model with NIL and with the revenue share things that are kicking in. And so you take that external experience with also roster management and the understanding of how rosters are built and what teams and programs internally are trying to do with their athletes and field championship teams. It kind of made sense for me to make that move over to Every True Tiger about a year ago, and excited what we're doing and what we're going to be doing in the future with Mizzou Athletics.
Absolutely. And I tell you, I've been lucky enough to work with you the last couple of years. I know Chris has, and say as a Mizzou fan, I can think of no one I would rather have in your seat, kind of in charge of the next wave of college athletics at Mizzou and making sure that they're well positioned. A lot going on, obviously, a lot of changes, but the biggest one is just took place July 1st with revenue sharing. There's been a lot said about it. Can you maybe go into that just kind of from a layman's terms, what that'll mean for fans?
Yeah, and there's a lot of variables in the what's considered the House settlement, and that again has nothing to do with the House of Representatives or Congress. It just happened to be the last name of one of the student athletes that brought the lawsuit against the NCAA, 5 years ago or so, and it's taken this long for it to be settled. And the quick and dirty of the settlement is that for the first time in the history of college athletics, institutions will have the ability to compensate student athletes directly through the institution. Now, we've had NIL the last 4 years, but that's all been through third-party sources that money has been distributed to the athlete. Most people understand those as collectives, but there have also been marketing agencies, i.e. Every True Tiger, that has done that with student athletes as independent contractors. But the universities and the athletic departments in and of themselves could not do the immediate distribution of dollars to the student athletes up until June 7th, when the House settlement was approved. And then on July 1st, it became the revenue share era. So that's probably the most important thing of the House settlement is the plaintiffs, and in this case, defendants, which was the Power Four conferences and the NCAA, basically said, okay, we are going to create a settlement by which student athletes can be compensated from a revenue share pot that each school has an opportunity to opt in on. So every Division I school can opt into the settlement requirements. What that allows them to do is have a cap on how much revenue they can distribute to the student athletes. In year one, that mark is $20.5 million. And then every school that opts in has the ability to go up to that. Doesn't mean you have to spend that, but it means you cannot go above that in distributing it to your student athletes. And so most schools will break it down by, football, men's basketball, women's basketball. They may decide to give it to all sports in some form. They may decide to give it to 5 or 6 sports. They may give football more than they give basketball. It all depends on what the school decides to do. So you'll see a wide range across the board. Obviously, in the SEC, which Mizzou is a part of, the Big Ten, most of the Power Four conferences, you're going to see those schools opt in at the full amount of revenue share, and they'll use some of it for scholarships. Mizzou is going to use about $2.5 million of that to add additional scholarships, and that's the second prong of the settlement. Is there no longer are a limit on scholarships? There is now a roster limit per sport. So, for example, in the sport of men's basketball, previously you could have 18, 20, how many ever your institution wanted to have on the roster, but you were only allowed to have 13 full scholarships. So you had what were considered walk-ons. Now the roster cap is 15. All you can have is 15 players on your roster, but you can scholarship every single one of those if you choose to do so. So you could now have 15 scholarships in men's basketball. So you're going to see scholarships increase for sports like soccer, softball, baseball, some of those other Olympic sports and female sports. And Mizzou and the other brethren in the SEC are going to use $2.5 million right off the top in year one of that rev share cap to help fund those scholarships. So you, in essence, have $18 million to distribute at that point. So the two key prongs that you look at are you have now the money to distribute to the athletes from the institution. So every institution has to figure out how do we either make that fit into our budget through additional fundraising, through additional ticket sales, through additional revenue streams, or you reconfigure your budget, because it's not like somebody just dropped 20 million on the lap to add in there. You still have to go and figure out how that fits into your budget. And now you have these roster limits, the roster caps, where you can now do up to X amount of scholarships. And then the third piece is the third party NIL. So think of it as the authentic NIL. And Ken, you and I have been involved in a lot of those. Think of them as the Luther Burden, chips that were sold at Schnucks and other places. When Luther, yep, you got them right there. You held them up. That is a third party NIL agreement that is done between a business and a student athlete in the true sense of NIL. We want to use your name. We want to use your likeness. We want to use your image to endorse, to sell, to promote, to make appearances based on our product. And there have really been no guardrails around that previously, whereas now there is a new college sports commission set up by the Power Four leagues that will have an enforcement arm and will have a clearinghouse. So every deal that is done between a student athlete and a business has to be sent into this clearinghouse. There will be a process by which it is vetted for true business purpose and range of compensation, and then approved as to whether the student athlete can actually execute that deal. So those three things, I know that was about a 5-minute explanation of a very complex house settlement, but those are the key things. You've got revenue share institutions can do. You've got the roster caps and the scholarships that can now be added. And then you have third-party NIL, which is now going to have guardrails around it, so there is an authentic business purpose. And it kind of is all meant to try to continue to reward student athletes and allow student athletes to benefit from NIL. That's the number one thing that needs to happen. But also it's put into place maybe some more sanity to the system on how much schools are able to spend and build rosters, because we all know this comes down to recruiting and competitive advantage and how you build your rosters across the board so you can try to win championships. NIL plays into that, and this was set up in order to try to create a little bit better of a streamlined system, so that you just didn't have $40 million football rosters or 15 million men's basketball rosters, and so that everybody was kind of working from a similar range of dollars that can be utilized, if that makes sense.
Hey, Brad, I got a quick question about those scholarships. So we talk about scholarships, and we've got, say you got 500 student athletes across 20 sports in your program, your university, whatever it might be. In the old days, they talked about, this sport's got 6.9 scholarships, or this sport's got 11.2 scholarships. These 15 scholarships are, that are appropriated to a basketball program. Are those full scholarships, or how does that work?
Well, they technically do not have to be. There used to be sports that were considered head count. So, for example, in the sport of football, at the FBS level, and in Division I, there's the FBS and the FCS level. At the FBS level, which is what Mizzou competes in, you were allowed to have 85 head count scholarships. So every single one of those scholarships went to one individual. So you basically could not spread those scholarships out. Now in the sport of baseball, you had like 11.9 scholarships that you could spread out amongst, how many ever athletes you wanted to. You could give half scholarships. You could give pay for schooling for one. You could do, cost of attendance for another. The way the new settlement words it is that scholarships now are at the cap of the roster size, and they are called equivalency scholarships, so you can spread those out. In basketball, it probably doesn't make as much of a difference as it does in other sports because look at Mizzou, for example. We could have up to 15 men's basketball players or 15 women's basketball players, and you can have 15 scholarships. So you're typically just going to give one scholarship, a full scholarship to an athlete at that point. Now in football, as of current right now, going into year one, most schools around the country are going to remain at 85 scholarships, but the roster cap is 105. So they're keeping the sanctity of like 20 walk-on spots. But in theory, you could take, one of those 85 scholarships and spread it out amongst two or three players, so that you may have 88 guys on some sort of scholarship, but three of them are on partial scholarship or four of them are on partial scholarship rather than full scholarship. And that's how you could do that. So you still have walk-ons, but you're able to distribute a little bit to some of those walk-ons, similar to what FCS has done before, or what track and field or baseball or some of the other sports have had an equivalency. I hope that makes sense a little bit there, Chris.
It does. It does.
Absolutely. So, Coach Drink and Coach Gates and Mizzou overall seems like we've really been ahead of the game the last few years, and it's an ever-changing game, and obviously it continues to change with rev share. What have you seen that football and basketball, and for that matter, the other sports, are doing at Mizzou to try to continue to stay ahead of the game?
Well, I think first and foremost is it's been a very aggressive posture that Mizzou athletics has taken over the last 3 years, and that is not just within the athletic department. In fact, it really starts at the political level with the state legislature at Missouri, the board of curators for the Missouri system, our president and chancellor Moon Choi, all the way down into the athletic department and the coaches, by trying to get ahead of the curve with some state laws, several years ago that allowed the Mizzou model, as we like to talk about, be able to put into place. And what that did is the state laws and some of the changes that were there allowed any high school athlete in the state of Missouri that signs a financial aid agreement, so a valid financial aid agreement with an in-state school. So that's not just the University of Missouri. It's also, Missouri State and SEMO and other schools that are state institutions. They could begin to receive NIL. And that NIL could, in fact, come through a third-party entity, whether it be a collective or, in this case, Every True Tiger as an agency. As soon as they signed that, they were able to receive some NIL and then also go out and broker their own third-party NIL deals. Where in a lot of states 2 years ago, high school athletes receiving NIL was not allowed. So we stayed in front of the course that way. The other way that the state law allowed us to benefit was, but when Every True Tiger was converted from a foundation or quote unquote collective, as a lot of them were known and have been known, into a branding and marketing agency, we were able to execute an agreement with the University of Missouri to represent them as the marketing and branding agency. And in that regard, we were able to hire student athletes to independent contractor contracts where their NIL was in essence being a brand ambassador for the university. So they could participate in ticket campaigns in Missouri, in what at that point was the Tiger Scholarship Fund campaigns, now the Mizzou Athletics Fund, in trying to generate revenue, but also to promote their sport, to promote ticket sales, to promote attendance, to make appearances, to go on donor meetings, basically becoming a brand ambassador for the university, which is the model that every school is having to move toward now with RevShare. We were just able to do it 18 months ahead of it and had a system in place where we felt like we had an advantage and we were able to really maximize our growth potential in the area of NIL. And then you saw the coaches buy into that and become, very aggressive in how we were to do our recruiting, how we were to set up roster management, how to use NIL to create the contracts that we could lock student athletes into from retention. When you look at roster management, it starts with retaining the high caliber athletes you have to have. You cannot lose those or have them cherry picked by other schools. So you have to have a strong NIL program where they know when they sign a contract, they're going to receive the NIL. They're going to do the activities they have to do for that. We manage that, and then we were able to provide them the NIL from there. Whereas sometimes you hear horror stories at schools where they either didn't sign a contract or they signed a contract and the collective didn't have money to pay them. Well, we were able to set ourselves apart that way, and then we were able to have Coach Drink, Coach Gates, the other coaches. Coach Smith has done a really good job in wrestling with it. We've had a really strong success in volleyball with Coach Sullivan, and across the board in other sports where we've been able to take that model and retain athletes, but then go out and acquire talent in the transfer portal with how strong our NIL program is. Now with revenue share coming to the front, it kind of evens things out a little bit. And the next big thing is how are you able to capitalize on what we call 3PN? And that's that third party NIL, where you can get those business to athlete associations and in essence, build deals, marketing deals that are true NIL deals that give you some room above the rev share cap to be able to recruit and retain athletes, because you're actually branding them and you're setting themselves up in marketing and branding situations with corporate partners, whether it be in Columbia, Jeff City, Kansas City, St. Louis, Springfield, and all areas in between. That is going to be one of the competitive advantages that schools have to figure out, is how to maximize that 3PN.
That's great stuff. And we'll get more on that after the break. You're listening to Business of Sports, Playmakers Beyond the Competition on the Lou Information Station, live and on demand 24/7 at louinfo.com. Welcome back. We are here with Brad Larrondo on our very first Business of Sports, Playmakers Beyond the Competition show. You can catch us live Sunday mornings at 10 or find us on YouTube or any major podcast outlet. Also, always find us at louinfo.com. So, Brad, we were talking before the break about the third-party NIL, and that's really where the separator can be between schools. Talk about that a little bit and maybe some of the businesses that are taking advantage of that.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, that's really what NIL was meant to be. I mean, if you're looking at it, what we call 3PN or third-party NIL is that authentic NIL ability for a business, a company, whether it be big, whether it be small, to actually partner with a student athlete and utilize that student athlete to help them endorse that product, to promote it, to be part of the marketing campaign around it, whether that be in commercial advertising, whether it be in packaging, whether it be in appearances at a store or at a venue, whether it be social media influencer type campaigns. And that's really what third-party NIL is. And I would say right now, actively, we've got, even since the House settlement was approved on June 7th, we've got 30 plus different athletes across 11 sports. And, it's moving up there, north of $300,000 worth of business deals that are in the process of being contracted or have already gone to NIL Go to be approved. And what NIL Go is basically the clearinghouse that says this deal is approved. And that's the new function of the settlement, is rather than saying, okay, collective A, B, or C has signed an athlete to a charitable appearance at this location, and we're going to provide them $500,000 for an hour-long appearance. Now the regulations and the clearinghouse is saying it needs to be a valid business purpose. There needs to be deliverables within it that shows that the athlete is doing quid pro quo, so that they're actually being hired and they're doing marketing deliverables, and that it's in a fair market value range of compensation. So the clearinghouse has the ability to turn down a deal if they deem it does not have a valid business purpose, that the range of compensation is higher than what market value is, or they believe that the entity that is trying to pay the athlete is not necessarily a true business, or is trying to do it because they're either donor-led, booster run, and they're trying to just get an athlete money in the pay-for-play sense. Now, I know, Ken, you've actually had, through Haystack Sourcing, a couple different deals that you've had go through NIL Go, and you've received the attestation form that tries to verify your affiliation. And that's what's happening, is the clearinghouse is trying to put some guardrails around just the amount of money being dumped into the system as a pay for play versus a valid business purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really interesting to me when I filled out the forms. They really are protecting against collectives doing just what you said. There's a number of fairly simple form, but there's a number of questions that lead to do you donate a certain amount to said school? Do you have an affiliation with the collective from that school? So they really are trying to protect against collectives going outside the lines, so to speak. Brad, for the audience, if a company is out there and wants to get involved with NIL and with the Mizzou players, how do they go about that?
Yeah, and that's a good distinction. And there's two different ways you can get involved in what we're trying to do, from an NIL and rev share standpoint. One, there still is a $20.5 million budget line item that the athletic department has. Now that will feed the revenue share into things. So if you do have interest in or you are a Mizzou Athletics Fund member, you can still contribute to the MAF fund, and that helps offset those dollars that go to the go to revenue share in some form or another across the board, because that still is a nut that has to be cracked. The additional way you can get involved if you wanted to do a business to athlete NIL deal is to work directly with Every True Tiger, and you can go to everytruetiger.org. Obviously you can get to us through email and through the website, and you can make inquiries. And we have 35 to 40 businesses that are doing third-party NIL deals with student athletes. The other way is if you wanted to do a full corporate partnership with Mizzou Athletics, the Mizzou Sports Properties can look at everything from in-stadium to NIL to radio network, and also has the IP rights to utilize the Mizzou logo. So there's a number of ways you can get involved. But let's just say you wanted to look at talking about having 2 to 3 athletes from whatever sport you're interested in. It could be football, it could be swimming and diving. It might be whatever you're interested in looking at or helping with. We can set up with your business an opportunity to hire and you would have the non-exclusive NIL rights to those athletes to promote your business, and the amount that you would spend is very very minimal compared to a lot of marketing campaigns that the athletes are doing, because we have a lot of athletes that even being able to get an NIL deal for a couple $1,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, that's a big amount of money for them to be able to help support them. We have to remember that not every athlete is signing $1 million contract. Those are very few and far between. We have over 400 student athletes, and any even a small NIL thing can, at the base of what NIL stands for, can help them and can help that staff in being able to recruit and retain athletes. So really the best way to do it is to look at Every True Tiger, see if your business wants to align with one of our student athletes, and then we set up a marketing campaign with you that's a true business to athlete with the deliverables, with the business purpose, that it fits within a range of compensation. We push it through NIL Go with the athlete to get it approved, and boom, you've got yourself an NIL deal with a student athlete that helps promote your business.
Hey, Brad,
Awesome.
Just one thing about the, kind of the administration of the policing of, these NIL deals through NIL Go, this College Sports Commission, what is that all about? What is their role, and how this all works?
Well, I think that's a great question, Chris, because that's what everybody's talking about right now out in the news, if you follow it, is how enforceable will the clearinghouse and the College Sports Commission be? Are they going to set the standard and make sure that they enforce those standards? The College Sports Commission is an entity made up of 10 or so athletic directors from around the country. So this is not the NCAA. The NCAA is no longer part of the enforcement of this House settlement and third-party NIL regulations. The College Sports Commission was set up by the commissioners and the institution members, mainly the Power Four conferences, of which obviously the SEC is a part of. So we're talking about athletic departments, institutions, and the conferences setting this in place so that there are guardrails around how these deals are made, so that there isn't this absurd amount of money coming from a certain third-party organization, and there's nothing being done to earn that money. It's basically pay for play. So the big question, and this is where institutions are and leadership within the college scene is saying, we have to give this thing a chance. Let's give it a chance to see where it is. Let's operate under the system we're in. We're only, a little over a month from June 7th to where we are now in this, and there's been thousands of third-party NIL deals that have been sent through. We at Mizzou, we've sent through a handful at this point, and we've had them approved. and they've been small deals that we've worked with local businesses and some corporate partners on doing. And it's been a fairly smooth process for us. I know that Deloitte, who is the group that is asked to handle the clearinghouse, is being inundated by a lot of deals, and they're working through them. But what happens is you have collectives outside there, or you have agents for the athletes that talk about, hey, if you turn down my deal, we're going to sue you. How can you do that from an antitrust type of thing? How can you tell, this business that wants to pay athlete A that they can't pay him that? And that's what's going to be interesting over the next 2, 3, 6 months is how does all that stand up? As a college sports business side of things, we have to give this thing a chance. I mean, I truly believe that because it does allow for some basically some streamlined and consistency across the board when it comes to how much money is out there. We're not trying to take away, or the system isn't trying to take away NIL opportunities for student athletes. Number one, that's the thing. They are not trying to take that away. There's trying to be where it's a valid business purpose that fits within a fair market range of compensation so that there is like a level playing field from school to school on how these NIL deals are put together, and that it does meet the true intent of what NIL is, while also balancing the fact that these are still student athletes. They're going to school. They have a very hard regimen of training, working out, and on top of it, they're becoming entrepreneurs in some ways. But the sanctity of college sports has always been around, quote unquote, the amateur model, where they are student athletes first. And now this has allowed them to go out and be compensated for their name, image, and likeness. But there has to be some parameters on making sure it is not pay for play. And that's what makes it different than the pro leagues or the NFL, where there isn't necessarily a clearinghouse that goes and monitors how much Patrick Mahomes makes from his State Farm insurance deal. But at the college level, it is still talking about 19 to 23-year-old student athletes that have some area of amateurism still within the constraints of what the college system is set up.
Yeah, Brad, you mentioned earlier the importance of retention, and there's a lot of stories going around that players are just going to the highest bidder, and there's a lot of stories I know of Mizzou players that are staying here for less money than they know they could get elsewhere, and that speaks to the culture, especially football and basketball. Coach Drink and Coach Gates, and that's got to be an important element here.
Well, I don't think you can ever forget that the decision you make to which school you attend has got to be about who you're around and who you're surrounded by, and the coaches and who's developing you, the culture of the program, the competitive level that it's at. Have got to be the choices that a student athlete makes. I think we built tremendous culture at Mizzou, and we've been able to back that up with strong, performances on the court, on the floor, on the field, wherever it might be. And I think when you do that, and then you say what you're going to do, and what I mean by that is if NIL is a part of it, compensating student athletes at the college level is a part of the world we are living in right now. Mizzou was able to embrace that and didn't shy away from it. And there are still a lot of people out there that don't feel like college student athletes should be compensated. And they have every right to that opinion. But the reality of it is it doesn't matter because college student athletes are being compensated. And Mizzou has made the choice to stay aggressive in that area, has put in place the things that have to happen in order for us to be competitive in that area. And then we backed up what we said we're going to do for the student athletes by doing it and making sure that they have the resources necessary to complete the activities they have to do, that they get paid on time for their NIL activities. And as we move into the rev share era, that we are going to be a fully opted in rev share program that is going to be able to do that with student athletes. But we're also setting up a robust third-party NIL program that allows us to hopefully maintain some competitive advantage when it goes to retaining student athletes and the amount of money we have to do that, but also to acquire talent coming in. And we're not just talking about football and men's basketball. We're talking about other key sports. I mean, we were an inning away from being in the Women's College World Series in softball 2 years ago. Our wrestling program is perennial top 10. Our gymnastics program just finished third in the country. Volleyball just went to the Sweet 16 on the heels of making it to the round of 32. So the next step is how do they get to the Elite Eight or the Final Four? We have a new women's basketball coach that has brought some tremendous energy to this, and we know that we can flip the roster in a sport with NIL to get competitive, even in a league as good as the SEC in a short period of time. And we have the coaches in place and the culture to do that. Now we have to be able to put together, how we distribute that revenue share the most competitively, and how we're able to go out and utilize local businesses in St. Louis, in Kansas City, in Columbia, and our corporate partners to be able to maintain a competitive advantage when it comes to third-party NIL.
Hey, Brad, it's been about a year since you jumped through the wall, so to speak, where you were inside the athletic office and you made the change, and you're with Every True Tiger. I mean, you've got, almost 20 sports. You've got, over 400 student athletes. How do you do it? I mean, what does your staff look like? What does your day-to-day look like? And July 1st was a big day for this announcement with NCAA versus House, and there's the evolution of the industry. How do you see your office environment changing over these next 12 months?
Well, I think what we tried to do over the last 3 to 4 months was predict and look around the corner. It's kind of like trying to take a curve with a flashlight because you don't know what's quite around that corner. But in doing this, we knew that the business side of it and the professionalized side of it was going to come together. And so we ramped up a staff. We've got about a staff of 7 people now at Every True Tiger, and about half the staff really looks at it from marketing and activation and brand partnerships, the quote unquote third party NIL, because in some ways that is more important for us to look at for the sports other than football and men's basketball. I don't want to downplay that we won't have third party NIL and that there aren't football and basketball athletes that will be heavily involved in third party NIL. But when you look at, our wrestling program or our gymnastics program or our women's basketball, volleyball, baseball, softball, they are going to have to remain competitive by us being able to brand partnership businesses with the student athletes. So we've got a staff of 3 to 4 that work on brand partnerships. They work closely with the Mizzou Athletics Fund in being able to identify donors or businesses or suite holders that can help in that area without crossing over to you can't always go to the well, the same well for every drink of water. So you've got to be able to be unified. And then they work closely with Mizzou Sports Properties from all of the corporate partnerships that give you access inside venue to outside of it through digital media. And then the other side of the fence we have with Every True Tiger is really just being able to contractually, legally, and from a budget standpoint, allow the coaches to know what they've got budget, how much are they distributing, how are we trying to look a roster ahead. And we've got several people that specialize in that as you try to forecast out what the 2026 roster looks like, even before you play the 2025 first game in football, or you're thinking about, okay, who are you losing in this sport at the end of the 2025-26 year, and how much do you have that opens that up to be able to think about retention, transfer portal. And so kind of that cap management is what I like to call it. The cap management has become much more like you see in the NFL or NBA or professional sports, because you're balancing a budget. You're trying to think retention first. Then you got to go out and you've got to build your base through high school athletes. So how much are you able to do there when signing day rolls around? And then obviously there's the transfer portal that creates free agency, every year. And athletes understand that, and they can either use that as leverage, or you can try to get out in front of it and say, this is what we're willing to do. This is how you fit in, and this is how we value you. And you hope at that point that they decide not to enter the transfer portal. And so you've kind of got two sides of that you're working every day between setting up third-party deals and then trying to manage the rosters and work with the head coaches every day on what they're doing from retention to player and talent acquisition.
Brad, this has been great information for everybody. Before we let you go, though, got to have you put your football hat back on. And we just had SEC Media Days, which means the season is around the corner. How's the outlook for the Tigers this year?
Well, I mean, I think everybody out there has a lot of high hopes for this team. I mean, you don't go 21-5 over the last 2 years, beat an Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, win a Music City Bowl last year, and finish back-to-back years in the top 20 without having a solid foundation for the program. And I think that's really what Coach Drink and the staff and what we've been able to do is put together a roster that probably has as much depth as Mizzou has ever had. I do think that we were able to really make some inroads in the transfer portal market, not just in December and January, but picking up a couple other pieces in April in the portal market. And probably the biggest thing out of that is 12 of our 19 or 20 transfers that we were able to bring in have multiple years of eligibility. So it's not just a one-year rental, so to speak, that you're able to kind of forecast ahead and realize that you've got a number of these guys that have at least 2, if not 3 years to play, and that helps you build some consistency in the roster, because the more consistency you can have year to year in a sport with your roster, the better it can be. And I think you've seen us be able to do that in football. You've got a defense that is really went heavy in the portal, and I think we got some really, really good players that are going to be able to jump in, that are returning players like Zion Young, like Tristan Newsom, like Chris McClellan, even looking at the back end with Dalen Carnell. But then you bring in a Jalen Catalon, who's an All-American transfer from UNLV. You bring in a guy like Josiah Trotter, who was a freshman All-American at West Virginia. You look at the DNs that we brought in, whether it be Damon Wilson from Georgia or Nate Johnson from App State, who was a freshman All-American 2 years ago. You really have bolstered and created a lot of depth on the defense. Offensively, you've got some real, real good talent at wide receiver with Kevin Coleman, a St. Louis kid that we brought in from Mississippi State, but also the Josh Mannings and Marquise Johnsons and Donovan Alubade, who's one of our prize freshmen there. You got Brett Norfleet and Jordan Harris back at tight end. You got a couple of returning starters on the O-line, but we feel like we brought some transfers in, like Dominic Giudice, Keegan Trost, and then we picked up Jalen Early, kind of in the late spring portal. Left tackle is going to be a position we got to evaluate over the fall and see who, but you've got some players that can jump in there. And then, of course, at quarterback, you've got what I think are three really, really talented quarterbacks. The two that jump out to everybody are Bo Pribula and Sam Horn, because they've got, several years already of college ball that they've been able to be in a system or get some action there. But Matt Zollers, I tell you what, as a freshman, he was really impressive this spring. And so the future is really good at quarterback. But you've got to see who's going to be under center. I mean, we've been very spoiled with Brady Cook as a 3-year starter in essence at quarterback. So now you're starting a new quarterback. And, the schedule is set up with, I think it's 6 home games to start the season off, to where you can get that thing, kind of get the things rolling. But I do like the talent and the depth. Like every program, there's still, a few question marks that are going to get answered during fall camp. And we're going to see how hard these guys work during the summer. Coach Russell and the strength and conditioning program puts them through the gauntlet during the summer, and that's to get them ready for what's about ready to kick off on July 28th with fall camp. And we'll see how hard they worked. And we know they worked hard, but the proof will be in the pudding once fall camp goes, and then we open that season up. But a lot of excitement around it, and I think the fan base should be excited. The expectation is to compete, for a championship, to compete in the SEC, and to compete to get into that college football playoff. And I think Coach Drink doesn't make any bones about it. That's where this program wants to be.
Brad,
You got me pumped up. I'm ready to go to Frofield now. I'm
stoked. The details that you have is incredible. It's an incredible time for college athletics, and where we go from here, who knows? But I'm glad you're at the forefront, leading the way. And just thank you so much for your time this morning. And looking forward to a great season. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, you guys as well. Good luck with the show and everything that way. Let me know if you ever want me back on.